The year was 1824, when the frontier of the young United States stretched westward like an unrolled map, its blank spaces waiting to be filled by those desperate, or reckless, enough to claim them. Settler cabins clung to the edges of the Appalachian foothills, where thick forests whispered of older inhabitants and rivers carved silent borders between two worlds. In the mornings, mist hung low over the valleys, and the air smelled of wood smoke and pine. Life was harsh, but for those who bent themselves to its demands, the land promised survival, perhaps even prosperity. In one such cabin, standing at the edge of a clearing hacked from the trees, lived Anna Whitfield. She was 18, the eldest daughter of a stern farmer who measured worth by obedience and endurance. Her hands were calloused from hauling water and grinding corn, but her spirit, restless, sharp as flint, had never softened to her father's command. She had grown up under rules as unyielding as iron: speak only when spoken to, never question authority, and above all, remember that a daughter's future was not hers to choose. Anna had learned to keep her face still when her father spoke, though her heart beat differently. At night, when the family slept, she would slip outside to watch the stars scatter their light across the blackness. She listened to the sounds of the woods, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of deer in the underbrush, and dreamed of a life larger than the four cramped walls that smelled of smoke and sweat. She wanted more than survival. She wanted freedom. But freedom was not a word her father valued. His eye was set on alliances, on the accumulation of land and security. That winter he struck a bargain with John Hensley, a widower 20 years Anna's senior, who owned broad fields and 50 head of cattle. The man was thick-set, with a graying beard and a voice like gravel. His reputation for cruelty was no secret. He ruled his household with a whip and expected obedience from wife and child alike. Yet for her father, such matters were irrelevant beside the gleam of cattle and acreage. Anna heard the terms of her fate at the supper table, where her father announced that come spring she would marry Hensley and secure their family standing. Her mother lowered her eyes, silent as always. Her younger brothers smirked, knowing Anna's protests would meet with nothing but punishment. And Anna, though the blood pounded in her ears, forced herself into silence. That night she lay awake staring at the rafters, her body rigid with dread. Marriage, to her father, was a transaction. To Hensley, it would be ownership. To Anna, it meant the death of her last fragment of choice. The walls of the cabin seemed to close in, the air growing thick, until she slipped outside into the night air and gulped it down as though she had been drowning. The world beyond the settlement had always frightened and thrilled her in equal measure. Stories of raids, wild beasts, and endless wilderness were used to warn women against wandering too far. Yet Anna felt the pull of those woods like a secret promise. In their shadows lay danger, yes, but also escape. She traced the line of the distant ridge, imagining what lay beyond. Could she leave? Could she trade certainty, however bitter, for the unknown? Her days became a slow torment, each one bringing her closer to the wedding her father was already boasting of. Hensley visited the cabin, his heavy hand resting possessively on her shoulder as if testing a new horse. The smell of tobacco clung to him, sharp and choking. Each time he left, Anna felt as though the walls pressed tighter, leaving less and less space for breath. One evening, after Hensley's visit, Anna's father cornered her by the fire. "You'll honor this arrangement," he said, his voice flat with authority. "There's no life for a girl alone. Don't shame us with foolishness." Anna met his gaze for the first time in years. Something inside her, some ember of defiance, flared. She did not speak, but the silence itself was a challenge, and he struck her across the face with the back of his hand. Her mother flinched, but said nothing. Anna tasted blood and salt and understood with sudden clarity. If she stayed, she would vanish into a life not her own. That night, while the household slept, Anna knelt beside her straw mattress and gathered what she could. A loaf of bread, her father's old hunting knife, a wool cloak. Her hands trembled, but her mind was steady. She slipped outside into the darkness, where the cool air brushed her cheeks and the trees loomed like watchmen. The ground was damp beneath her boots, and the world smelled of earth and rain. She looked once at the cabin, her prison, her childhood, her family, and turned her back on it. Ahead lay only wilderness, rivers swollen with spring rains, ridges crowned with forests, trails no settler woman dared tread alone. Yet the thought of remaining, bound to Hensley, filled her with deeper terror than any unknown could. Anna stepped forward into the woods, her breath loud in her ears. With each stride, the weight of the cabin lifted. The air grew colder, the night sound sharper. She was afraid. How could she not be? But beneath the fear ran something else, something fierce and unyielding. Hope. By dawn, she was miles from home, a lone figure swallowed by the forest's vastness. The sun rose behind the ridges, gilding the treetops with fire, and Anna paused to catch her breath. Her face was scratched, her cloak damp with dew, but her heart pounded with a rhythm she had never known. For the first time in her life, she was moving toward a destiny of her own making. She could not have known that in those same woods, a hunter was already watching the trails, moving silently through the underbrush with eyes trained to notice every broken branch and bent blade of grass. Their paths would cross soon, and neither life would remain the same. Anna pressed deeper into the wilderness, guided only by instinct and the pale silver of moonlight. Each step carried her farther from the cabin and the life she had refused, yet also deeper into the uncertainty of the woods. The silence around her was deceptive. It seemed still, but when she paused, she could hear the forest breathing, the whisper of leaves, the distant rush of water, the cry of some unseen bird. By dawn her legs ached, and her bread was already half gone. She crouched beside a creek, cupping water to her lips, the chill of it clearing the fog from her mind. With daylight came clarity and fear. Her father would have woken by now. He would see her bed empty, the knife missing, the door left ajar. He would know, and he would not let her go without a chase. The thought spurred her forward. She followed the creek, reasoning it might lead to a river and, eventually, to some settlement where she could lose herself. But as the hours passed, the weight of solitude pressed harder. Every crack of a branch sent her head whipping around. Every shadow between the trees became a threat. By afternoon clouds had gathered, gray and heavy. Rain began as a drizzle and quickly thickened, soaking her cloak and chilling her to the bone. The bread turned soggy in her pack, and her boots squelched with each step. She stumbled, rose, stumbled again. Hunger gnawed at her belly, but worse than hunger was the sense of being hunted. Once, she thought she heard a man's voice in the distance, carried faintly on the wet wind. Her heart slammed against her ribs, and she pressed herself flat against the earth until the sound faded. She pushed on until twilight, when her strength failed. The trees closed in around her like a cage, and the storm had turned the ground into a mire. She huddled against a fallen log, teeth chattering, whispering to herself to stay awake. Sleep, she knew, was dangerous, yet her body betrayed her, pulling her under. When she woke, it was not the dawn light that stirred her but the sensation of being watched. She opened her eyes to find a figure standing just beyond the log. At first, she thought it a trick of the mist, but then he stepped forward, silent as a shadow. He was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in buckskin and carrying a bow that seemed a natural extension of his arm. His hair was black, bound with leather at the nape of his neck. His eyes, dark, steady, unreadable, studied her with the same patience he might give to a deer at the edge of a meadow. Anna froze, her hand darting toward her knife. The man did not move, did not threaten. He only watched. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, deliberate, touched with an accent she had only heard in passing whispers. "You are far from home." The words, simple as they were, tightened every muscle in her body. She rose slowly, clutching the knife before her. "Stay back." The man tilted his head, as if weighing her stance, her fear, her resolve. Then, with a calmness that unnerved her, he lowered his bow and placed it on the ground between them. His hands remained open, empty. "I mean no harm," he said. You are lost. I am not lost, she lied, though her voice shook. His gaze flicked to her torn cloak, her mud-caked boots, the pallor of her face. You are hungry, tired, alone. The truth of his words struck harder than any weapon. Anna tightened her grip on the knife. Why do you care? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he crouched, reaching into a pouch at his side. She flinched, ready to strike, but he only drew out a strip of dried meat and placed it on the log between them. Then he sat back on his heels, waiting. The smell of the food hit her, sharp and savory, and her stomach clenched with need. Yet suspicion warred with hunger. She stared at him, searching for malice, but found only patience. After a long moment, she snatched the meat and devoured it, never lowering her knife. He watched without comment. When she finished, he said quietly, "The storm will return tonight. You will not survive another without shelter. I'll manage. Not alone." His certainty stung, because she knew it was true. Still, pride held her tongue. She turned away, clutching her knife, ready to stumble deeper into the woods. But before she could take a step, her vision swam. Exhaustion dragged at her limbs, heavier than chains. She swayed, and the world tilted. Strong hands caught her before she fell. She gasped, twisting, the knife clattering to the ground. But the man did not restrain her harshly. He steadied her, then released her, allowing her to regain balance on her own. "You do not trust me," he said.
No. Good.
Trust is not given quickly. His words startled her. She expected anger or mockery, but his tone held neither. He spoke as if acknowledging a simple truth. He gestured toward the trees. "There's a place nearby.
Dry.
Safe. I will take you if you wish." Anna hesitated, every instinct screaming caution. Yet the thought of another night in the cold, wet forest nearly broke her resolve. She studied him, his calm eyes, his steady bearing. He could have harmed her already, but he had not. Slowly, she nodded. The man inclined his head, as though recognizing her decision carried weight. He retrieved his bow, then turned to lead the way. Anna followed, still wary, yet driven by something she had not felt since leaving the cabin. A flicker of hope, fragile as dawn breaking through storm clouds. The shelter he led her to was little more than a hollow beneath a ridge of stone, but it was dry and shielded from the wind. Branches woven into its entrance bore the mark of deliberate hands. He had built it for his own journeys, a hunter's refuge when the sky opened and the nights turned bitter. Anna sank to the ground, her body trembling with exhaustion. The man moved with quiet efficiency, gathering twigs, striking flint, coaxing a small flame into being. Light flickered across the hollow, and warmth crept into her bones. She watched him in wary silence, every movement sharp in her memory. The curve of his bow, the leather strap across his chest, the deliberate way he gave her space though the shelter was small. When at last he sat across from her, the fire between them, she asked, "What do I call you?" He regarded her for a moment before answering. "Ahiv." The name fell soft yet steady, like the river's current. She repeated it, the syllables foreign on her tongue. He gave a slight nod, as if to say it would suffice. "And you?" he asked. "Anna," she said. Her voice sounded thin, almost fragile in the close space. For a time neither spoke. The fire crackled, filling the silence with its low song. Anna pulled her damp cloak tighter, staring into the flames, aware of his eyes on her. She wondered what he saw, a foolish girl, running from a life others would call security? A burden that might bring trouble to his doorstep? "Why are you here?" he asked at last. The question cut deeper than she expected. She could have lied, told him she was lost, but she sensed he would know. Something in his gaze seemed to peel away falsehood. So she swallowed, her throat tight. "I left home," she said. Ahiv tilted his head. "And why?" Her hands clenched in her lap. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "They would have me wed a man twice my age. A man I cannot," she broke off, the rest sticking in her throat. He said nothing at first, only listened. His silence was not heavy like her father's, nor sharp like Hensley's. It was patient waiting. At length he said, "So you chose the woods over chains." She met his eyes then, startled. He had named her choice for what it was, and the truth of it struck her like a bell. "Yes," she whispered. He gave a small nod, neither condemning nor praising, only acknowledging. "The woods are harsh," he said, "but they are honest. They take only what they must." Anna studied him, trying to measure the man behind the words. His calm unsettled her as much as it comforted. She wondered if he, too, bore chains she could not see. Days passed. The storm broke and cleared, leaving behind crisp mornings and a forest washed clean. They traveled together in cautious rhythm. Ahiv moved with the ease of one born to the land, his steps soundless, his eyes always scanning. He taught her to watch the branches for signs of deer, to notice how moss grew thickest on the north side of trees, to still her breath when listening for water. She followed, learning quickly, though her body ached from the effort. At night they returned to the shelter or made camp beneath the stars. She found herself telling him fragments of her life, the creek she had played in as a child, the books her mother once read by lamplight, the terror of Hensley's heavy hand on her shoulder. He never pressed her, never judged, only listened. In turn, she listened to him. He spoke of hunting trails, of the rhythm of the seasons, of the way each creature gave itself to keep the circle unbroken. "The deer feeds the people," he said. "So we honor it, and we take no more than needed." His words carried a reverence she had never heard in her father's house, where the land was beaten into rows and measured by yield. Slowly, wariness gave way to trust. She noticed how he always walked on the side nearest danger, leaving her sheltered. How he shared food first, though his own portion was small. How he never touched her without purpose, never sought to claim what was not offered. Yet trust was not without fear. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Anna voiced what had been gnawing at her. "If my father's men find us, they will not listen. They will take me back." Ahiv's jaw tightened. "And you?" "I will not go," she said, her voice trembling but firm. His eyes held hers. In their depth she saw the weight of his own choice. To shield her was to place himself in the path of her pursuers, to invite conflict with people who already looked at him as other. The silence stretched, broken only by the hiss of the fire. Then he spoke, his words deliberate. "If you wish, I will give you my name. And my land."
They cannot take you then.
Anna blinked, startled. "What do you mean?" "In my people's way," he said, "to give my name is to make you part of my circle. To give my land is to bind you to its shelter. With both you are not alone. You are not prey for others to claim." The offer struck her with both wonder and fear. He was not like Hensley, who sought to own. Ahiv spoke of protection, of belonging freely chosen. Yet the weight of it was immense. Her heart hammered. She thought of the cabin, the whip hand of Hensley, the silence of her mother. She thought, too, of the forest, of the freedom she had tasted, of the steady patience of the man across the fire. "I don't know if I am worthy," she whispered. He shook his head. "It is not worth. It is choice. Yours." The firelight flickered between them, casting shadows that danced along the stone. Anna felt the gravity of the moment, a crossroads she had never imagined.
She did not answer that night.
But as she lay awake beneath the stars, she knew her choice was no longer about escape alone. It was about the life she would claim, and the man who had placed that decision for the first time in her own hands. The days that followed felt borrowed, fragile as dew at sunrise. Anna and Ahiv walked the ridges, their steps quiet, their words measured. She had not yet spoken her answer to his offer, but it lived between them, unspoken, like the glow of coals that wait beneath ash. She sensed that choice pressed closer with each sunrise. Freedom was no longer only escape, it was the shape of a life she must claim. On the fifth morning, that fragile peace shattered. They had camped in a grove near the river, where sycamores rose tall and pale against the sky. The water's song muffled the forest's silence, so, at first Anna did not hear the hoofbeats. It was a Hiv who froze, his head turning sharply, his body tense as a bowstring. Then she heard it, the distant drumming of horses, the snap of branches forced aside. Pursuit had found her. Panic surged. She reached for the knife at her belt, her breath quickening. "It's them," she whispered. A Hiv's eyes narrowed, already scanning the trees. "Stay behind me." Moments later, riders burst through the undergrowth. 3 men, faces hard with anger and determination. At their head was her father, his jaw set like stone. Beside him rode Hensley, broad as a bull, his eyes burning with possession. A third man, one of her father's hired hands, carried a rifle slung over his shoulder. "Anna," her father barked, his voice slicing the air. "What madness is this? Come here at once." Her knees shook, but she did not move. She felt a Hiv's steady presence beside her, his hand resting loosely on the bough at his side, though he did not yet raise it. Hensley's gaze raked over her, full of scorn and hunger. "You've given us trouble enough, girl," he growled. "Time to end this foolishness. You'll come home now, and you'll wed me before week's end." Anna's mouth went dry. Old fear twisted inside her. The memory of his heavy hand, his stench of tobacco, the smirk of her brothers when her fate was sealed. But beneath the fear burned something harder, forged in nights of freedom and days of learning to survive by her own strength. She was not the girl who had crouched beneath her father's table in silence. She lifted her chin. "No." The single word struck like a thrown stone. Her father's face darkened, fury flashing in his eyes. "You dare defy me?" "I dare live," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I will not be sold like cattle. I will not belong to him, or to you." Hensley spurred his horse forward, snarling. "You've no choice, girl. You're mine." Before he could dismount, a Hiv stepped forward. His movement was calm, deliberate, but his presence commanded the space. His bow was raised now, arrow nocked, the line drawn with lethal grace. His voice, when he spoke, was low and steady. "She has chosen. You will not take her." The men stiffened. The hired hand's rifle shifted nervously. Anna's father spat on the ground. "This is no business of yours, Indian. Step aside, or you'll hang for theft." But a Hiv did not waver. His eyes, dark and unflinching, held theirs. "She is not property to be stolen. She is a life. Her own." Silence stretched, heavy with tension. The river rushed behind them, a ceaseless witness. Anna felt her pulse thunder in her ears. She knew violence balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word, one sudden move, and blood would stain the grass. She could not let that happen. The moment was hers as much as theirs. She stepped forward, placing herself between a Hiv and the riders. "You cannot take me back," she said, her voice gathering strength. "You may beat me, bind me, drag me behind your horses. But I will not stay. Not as wife, not as daughter, not as prisoner. My life is mine." Her father's face contorted with rage, but beneath it she saw something else. Hesitation, perhaps even fear. Not fear of a Hiv's bow, but of the iron certainty in her voice. He had never heard it before. Hensley cursed, dismounting, his hand reaching for her arm. But before he could touch her, a Hiv loosed his arrow. It struck the ground at Hensley's feet, thudding deep into the soil. The message was clear. Another step, and the next arrow would not miss. The hired man muttered under his breath, shifting uneasily. "Ain't worth dying for, John," he said to her father. "She don't want it." Her father's glare burned into Anna, but the fight was draining from him. He saw the hunter's bow, the rifleman's reluctance, and the fire in his daughter's eyes. Slowly, with bitter disgust, he turned his horse. "You're no daughter of mine," he spat. Hensley seethed but followed, cursing under his breath. The hired hand gave Anna a small, almost apologetic glance before spurring after them. Within moments, the trees swallowed the riders, their hoofbeats fading into distance. Silence fell, broken only by the river song. Anna stood trembling, the weight of what had passed settling upon her. Then she turned to Ahiv. You could have killed him, she whispered.
I did not need to, he said.
The choice was yours, not mine. Her eyes stung with tears, not of fear but of release. For the first time in her life, she had spoken and been heard, not by her father, not by Hensley, but by herself. That night, as they sat beside the fire once more, Ahiv spoke again of his offer. The land is wide, he said. You may walk it as you choose. But if you wish, my name will shield you, and my people will know you as one of us. Not as possession, but as partner. Anna looked into the flames, then at the man across from her, steady as stone yet gentle as river water. She thought of the girl she had been, silent, shackled by fear. That girl had run into the woods. But the woman she was becoming could choose to stay, not because she was bound, but because she was free. I choose, she said softly. Not chains, not silence. I choose this life. I choose you. His expression did not shift into triumph, but into quiet acknowledgement, as if he had expected nothing less than honesty. He reached across the fire, and she placed her hand in his. In that moment, the forest seemed to breathe around them, vast and unbroken. Anna knew the road ahead would not be simple. There would be whispers, dangers, a world quick to condemn what it did not understand. But she also knew that she had claimed her life with her own voice, her own will. No man could take that from her again. The moral was not hidden, nor wrapped in parable. It lay plain in the night air. Freedom is not the absence of bonds, but the courage to choose which bonds we honor. And love, real love, is not the chain of ownership, but the joining of two lives in respect. As the fire burned low, Anna lifted her eyes to the stars. Once, they had been distant lights she could only dream toward. Now, they were witnesses to a promise, that she would live, not as property, but as herself, beside a man who had offered her not command, but choice. And in that promise, she felt a future wide as the horizon.